Engaging Signals. My name is Daniel Vallis from InformedChristians.com, a website ministry devoted to discerning current events from a Christian and biblical perspective. This is a warning, but it is not a prediction. We see a lot coming together, very sobering events that we are seeing as well, so that's why this is a warning. We have heard the calls for peace and safety. That means sudden destruction is expected. Time is running out, but I do not know the future. I do not know what day this will happen on, but you can tell just by looking at the celestial signs and everything going on around us right now that time is quickly running out. If you have not yet, and especially if you are new to this channel and material, check out the link in the description box and download our PDF resource, Exodus 2, The Bride Goes to the King's House, which has a lot of information, pages and pages and pages of information about everything that's gone on in the last year, bringing us to this moment in time and how the celestial signs and prophetic signs have only increased. And we have heard the prophetic shadow call of the trumpet at midnight telling us that the bridegroom is near and we must make ourselves ready. And we've looked at a number of shadows and patterns that have come together all in one time period. The Bible gives specific dates for a reason to let us know that certain patterns go together. And in our last few videos, we talked about how this month and time is especially important. So also check out the Exodus 2 section on our website because it has a lot more hand-picked resources and articles that you will find of interest that go with it, especially if you are new to our channel and our ministry. Now, we've seen so many celestial signs coming together right now, very unique, especially really over the past month or so, even almost 2 months of solid, unique celestial signs drawing our attention to this time and highlighting it that something's very special, and we need to pay attention why these celestial signs are appearing at this time of very important shadows and patterns. But then on the news today came out an article about how Jupiter got smacked by an asteroid comet. And it happened a few days ago, back on March 17th, but this was when they finally were able to confirm it with another astronomer as well. So another interesting celestial sign in Jupiter, drawing our attention to Jupiter. And it's amazing that this happened just a few days before Passover. So it's an interesting illusion, I think, just a shadow of the king being struck at that time. And that goes in context with everything else that we've been looking at too as well. But I want to let you know we have a new resource on our website now. It's a poster. It's 3 feet by 21 inches. So if you can print it off, it'd make a great resource. But this just covers this month, this first month. And we've been talking about it in our last 2 or 3 videos about how this month is so important and so unique and different. And the barley harvest happens in this month. And we have a great expectation of things happening in this month. So definitely download the PDF, even if you can't print it out. Download it, explore it, look it over, because there's a lot of information and patterns coming together and overlapping right on top of each other in a very, very narrow window of time, just a few days. And at the same time, that celestial signs are happening too as well. So let me just show you some important things on it real quickly. With everything coming together, we have to consider and think that all these commemorations that happen every year, Passover and the Fast of Esther, Exodus, all those historical events and feasts and commemorations, they happen every single year. So what makes this year, and especially this time, unique, in addition to everything else we cover in the booklet, so definitely check that out. But what makes this time so unique is that all these patterns are happening in a cyclical fashion, just like they normally do, but they've been engaged with the celestial signs that have the exact same symbolism and known for that symbolism happening at the exact same time. And it's not going to happen again for another 12 years. We find ourselves at the end of the last generation. So the fact that these come together and meet up and engage each other as 2 different gears, the celestial sign that carries all the heavy symbolism and even scripture references it, it is now engaging the patterns and cycles that have been commemorated. We see them set in motion now in a way that they normally aren't. So we see all these shadows, in a sense, now in movement because the celestial sign above them, which is what we're told to look for, signs in the sun, moon, and stars. And hello, we've seen all those in just the past few days. And then also very specific, it tells us exactly which one to be looking at. In Genesis, we looked at that. All this is in motion right now, and with the clockwork of the celestial clock, we see it also having a very limited time. And then in context with the other patterns running out, and then other patterns coming up soon as well with the wheat harvest and the barley harvest ending very soon too as well. This time is super important. And the Lord has been calling our attention to clocks and time in so many different ways, especially in my own life. It's amazing how many unique clock and time stories I've run across or had people just randomly come and talk to me about just in the past few days. It's amazing because this time is very important, and God does want our attention on time and patterns because there's a systematic placement of the patterns and the shadows that if we don't study it, if we don't still our heart and our life and get away from all the busyness, if we don't stop and examine it, we might miss the complexity and we might just gloss over and think, oh, that's just random events happening. No, when we stop and study it and look at it, we see a very complex orderliness to it and systematic clockwork to everything coming together right now and being engaged in a new active manner. So right now, by the time you are watching this video, it's almost about halfway through day 20 on the Jewish calendar. So we still have about a day and a half of events in the Passover week, what's considered colloquially the Passover week, Passover through the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and that also includes the triumphal entry time period as well. But we still have a day and a half of very significant laden events when a lot of things that were started the days ahead of us are coming to full completion. So this time is still a high watch time that we are watching for very significant prophetic actions to take place in. Of course, tomorrow, in just over 12 hours, is the last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and it is an assembly. It is a gathering of the people. And like we talked about in our last video, trumpets were used to call them to assembly. It's very interesting when we consider the major celestial sign that links everything together right now is all about the gathering of the Messiah's people. And we see one final trumpet call for an assembly in this week. I do not know the future. I cannot say whether anything will happen or not, but we do find prophetic events moving forward to more and more detailed completion as these days go forward. So we must be sober and we must be vigilant because the days are getting more and more important that we need to be watching for. And also on the 21st is very important because that is the day that traditionally the Israelites crossed the Red Sea. The Bible doesn't come out and give the exact date for when that happened, but the Bible does say you commemorate the Feast of Unleavened Bread because they were basically hightailing it for 7 straight days to get out of Egypt. And that's when they ate the unleavened bread that they had cooked so quickly because they were on the way out. And that's what they ate for 7 days on the way out, rushing it. So Jewish tradition, and even by reading Scripture, it highly suggests, even Scripture does, that the crossing of the Red Sea happened on the 21st, the last day of unleavened bread, or right thereabout. So we don't know the day or hour of that, but it's very significant that that happened right on that day, the deliverance from Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea. And, of course, the Bible tells us that the sea was parted by the wind at night. So a lot of major events still up ahead of us. And we suspect that their fulfillment could happen at any time because they are just shadows and patterns. But we must be aware of what's coming, pattern-wise and shadow-wise. But then it's also interesting because when we look down on another layer of when the Israelites did enter the Promised Land much later, that the Bible tells us exactly when they crossed into the Promised Land. They observed Passover, and they would have observed the Feast of Unleavened Bread too as well. But then it basically intimates that the events of Jericho happened almost exactly as soon as they finished their feast days. And this is very important because with both the pattern of Exodus, the crossing of the Red Sea, what happened there? Yes, the Israelites got out, but it meant destruction, sudden destruction for the Egyptian army. So we are approaching the end time of the feast days here with the Passover week, but we are approaching 2 separate patterns that are laden with sudden destruction. And that's what we have been expecting. We've heard the calls for peace and safety. We are expecting sudden destruction. So when we see 2 major patterns of sudden destruction, separated by only hours apart here, this needs to catch our attention because we know time-wise it is coming. And so when we see a lot of attention being drawn to these other patterns during the Passover week as well, we have to assume, and we should assume, and be prudent and wise about it, that the other references to sudden destruction in this time period might also be very strongly referenced as well. Now on our website we have an entire article, an infographic, and even a video about the symbolism of Jericho and references to the tribulation. So this is very important. So definitely look in the description box for a link to that as well and check out the video for that. So that is sobering that not only do we find patterns of a gathering and assembly, but also patterns quickly and almost immediately going straight into ones about the tribulation. I do not know the future, but I do know we need to watch. We need to be ready, because one day God will call His children to assemble. We must make sure we are ready ahead of time. There will be no delay when the call comes. We will either be ready, we will either be found wise and faithful, or we will be found a hypocrite and foolish. Let us examine our life now, and our actions now, and what we're doing now, and our focus now. And even in the back of the Exodus 2 booklet, we have some guidelines from Scripture of how we can examine our ways and walks right now, so that we are ready when the trumpet calls us to assemble. Serve Christ first and highest above all else. Maranatha.